We are just kind of waiting for everyone to join us. Let's just say hi real quick. Hi, Paul. How are you? Where are you calling in from?
I am awesome, thank you, and I'm calling in from Santa Clara.
Wonderful. That's great. So how are you doing with the weather there?
Oh, the weather is absolutely beautiful. I love the weather in California.
Yeah.
I love running in the mornings.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I live in Northern California and it's hot. And
It's
we've
hot.
been
Where are you in Northern California?
in like Folsom, California. So just like 30 minutes north of Sacramento.
Got it.
Yeah, we've been surrounded by fires. So it's been
Yikes.
smoky and a little bit hot. So today is a beautiful day. The sky's finally blue again. We had about 2 weeks where the sky was not blue. And so it was a little bit rough. But yeah, we're very excited. So what brought you to our class today? What enticed you to join us this morning?
Yeah, I've been a business consultant for the last 17 years. As my practice is unfolding, I'm moving more and more towards doing personal coaching, performance coaching, transformational coaching.
Great.
I have a whole bunch of words that I can put before the word coaching. And one of them is emotional intelligence coaching. So I'm interested in connecting with other emotional intelligence coaches
Wonderful.
to gain their inspiration and their insight and to network and perhaps collaborate.
Wonderful. Good for you. Yeah, emotional intelligence is probably, well, that's the basis of everything that I teach. So it is the underline of every video, everything we do, whether we're talking about boundaries. I mean, you won't always hear me use the language, but it is the basis of all the work that I teach, which is wonderful because that fundamental piece is going to allow people the freedom to transform all other aspects of their life.
Amen. I think it's an incredibly wonderful framework. It gives people a structure that they can use to work on themselves, to overcome the challenges that
Yeah.
they're facing.
Yeah. And then you just find, your own voice within that umbrella, and figuring out how that looks and translates and how you can most effectively help people be able to move through that as well. So
Amen.
awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you joined us. Good morning, Shirley. Can you talk this morning? Can I say hi to you?
Hi.
How are you?
Good, good.
I'm so glad that you joined us this morning.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Always happy to see you.
Yeah, it's so good to see you as well. So what are you hoping to get out of today's class when we're talking about the cycle of self-sabotage?
Maybe uncovering something I hadn't known before, something
Yeah.
I might be doing to myself and not even realizing it.
Yeah. Well, you know how that goes. Shirley has been, she's been kind of working with us a little bit over the last year. I've seen your face a lot at our self-compassion groups and some of our other things as well. And so I love the awareness that you now have and recognizing that, okay, wait a minute, I'm participating in some way to this cycle. So what I'm thinking, because there's only a couple of you here, is that my team forgot to send the email out. Normally we'll have anywhere between 16 to 30 people on each one of these classes. So since there's only 2 of us, my suspicion is that the email didn't go out, which is totally okay. So I'm going to we're going to record. And what we're going to do is we'll still have this available for everybody on their for the replay video as well. So hang tight, guys. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to move over and share my screen with you all. So let's see here. And talk about this beautiful cycle of self-sabotage. I shouldn't say it's beautiful. It's actually kind of a pain in the ass, isn't it? If we're really being honest, right? If we're really struggling with the cycle of self-sabotage, it's not beautiful, but the transition out of it is going to be a beautiful process. And I'm really excited to be able to share this with you. You guys, over the years, I've taught so many different topics. And if you're watching this replay, as you know, it's going to show up on the replay page where you're going to get access to all kinds of different trainings, from boundaries to intro to emotional intelligence to winning the war of your worth. But this topic especially is probably one of my absolute favorite, and I tend to talk about it more than anything else because I recognize that this is one of the pain points that doesn't just affect some of us, it affects all of us. But what's interesting is it affects us all in different ways. So today what we're going to do is we're going to dive into why we self-sabotage, really understanding kind of the 3 main components of what fuels these behaviors that tend to wreak havoc in our lives, our dreams, our ambitions, our goals, our finances, our relationships, our diet, our nutrition. I could just go on and on. So we're going to dive into that aspect, into understanding the why. And then I'm going to share with you my 3-step solution on how to be able to overcome it once and for all. So if you guys are joining, I really want to make sure that you have paper and pen, that you're ready to take some notes, because there's going to be some work involved with what I share with you today. And this is an extension of what we talked about yesterday on our Facebook Live for the Emotional Revolution. Now, if you aren't familiar with that, Wednesday mornings between 8 and 8:30, I go live on my Facebook page, and we have an interactive conversation into how to shift and move you into a better emotional and mental state of being. It's what we call the emotional revolution. It is where we're just kickstarting a thought revolution in your psyche and helping you transform whatever it is that you're dealing with in your life. So if you haven't joined us on that, make sure to hunt me down on social media, because that's where we can talk and hang out. All right, housekeeping item. Make sure to be present here today. It is so easy to be distracted, to try to multitask. But you showed up, or you're listening to this on purpose. You've chosen to dive into this material for some reason today. And the only way you're going to make the most of it is if you eliminate any distractions that are around you. So I encourage you to turn off that TV, flip over that phone, to eliminate any distractions that could pull your attention so you can make the most of this time with me. So before we dive in, I really want to share with you a little bit about who I am as what I call your emotional intelligence professor. So I have so many certificates, credentials. I have a lot of extensive training around this topic of personal development, emotional intelligence, energy leadership, and what makes me a qualified master coach to be able to teach all of you how to be able to move through. But I personally don't believe that those credentials are what make me the best coach for you. In fact, what I truly believe, it's been my been there, done that experience that has allowed me to understand both sides of the coin, that allows me to be the most efficient and effective coach. So for those of you who haven't got a copy of my book, who haven't listened to any of the podcasts and really listened to about my story, I have, like most people, experienced a tremendous amount of adversity. Before I even graduated high school, I had become addicted to drugs. I had already been in and out of jail. I had experienced a lot of physical and sexual trauma. I had dealt with a lot of abandonment issues, a lot of psychological abusive issues. I was a hot mess. I truly believed before I even turned 18 that I was worthless. And there was no convincing me otherwise. Now, if you can imagine a child who believes they're worthless, think of the level of self-sabotage they'll get themselves into. Think of the people they will date, the jobs that they will take, the ambitions that they might have or not have. Well, sure enough, these beliefs, these core beliefs of feeling worthless and not enough, were fueling like these massive cycles of self-sabotage. And I was finding myself in toxic and dysfunctional relationship or abusive relationship after abusive relationship. I was continuing to be in and out of jail. I was in and out of rehab. I was taking jobs where I lived below the poverty line. My finances were sabotaged. My fitness was sabotaged. My health was sabotaged. My relationships were sabotaged. So if you think I know the cycle of self-sabotage, you're right. Because that was there were so many components, and we'll talk about that here in a minute of what causes your self-sabotage, but there's so many components that kept me stuck in this cycle. Now, if you can see, I mean, to transform from that level of misery and dissatisfaction and pain to the woman that all of you know now today, right? The woman that is happy-go-lucky, is about to have her first child, who is, just lives an amazing and abundant life, who gets to enrich so many other people, who lives her passion every day, and truly has a deep-rooted core self-confidence and self-love and respect for herself, that's a huge transformation. And so for me, that is what makes me the most effective and efficient coach, because I've been there and I've done that. So no matter where you're starting from, no matter what you're struggling from, I share my story because I want you to know that it is possible to overcome. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It's going to require work. It's going to require willingness, and it's going to require your commitment. But if you're willing, there is a way. And I'm going to introduce you to that way today and hopefully inspire you to continue to take the action necessary so you too can live the life of freedom. So, all right, let me actually go here real quick in the chat box because I saw, oh, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. He's congratulating me on my transformation. Yeah, it was a lot of work, I'll be honest with you. But that's all right. So I'm going to teach you guys the shortcut to it today, because if you can imagine, when I was studying that transformation, I had to go to a lot of different sources. And so the education that I have now, I mean, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of experimenting under my belt to really get to a process that is really efficient and effective. And that's what I developed my core material on. And that's what I'm going to be sharing a little bit of with you guys today. Okay, so let's talk about what this cycle of self-sabotage is. Now, if you are listening, if you are just watching this, like I said, I want you to do some work. So I want you to ask yourself, as I explain what this is, how do you self-sabotage? So if you need to write that down to remind yourself, now's the time to do that. How do you self-sabotage? Because what we're going to do is that we are going to dive into understanding what it is, but that's not personal enough. I want you to, when we get to the 3 steps, to know what you need to work on. And here's the trick. Maybe you self-sabotage in a lot of different ways. But what I want to do is I want to find out maybe where you are self-sabotaging in the little ways as well. And then just focus on one. Here's the trick, you guys, is that it is very easy to want to try to change everything. And that's going to lead you to failure, because we can truly only master one thing at a time. So if you self-sabotage, let's say in fitness, nutrition, and finances, I want you to choose the one area that is the most painful right now and focus on mastering that. The skills that you use to master that will apply to these other areas. But just by focusing on that one, it's going to allow us the space and the mental and emotional room to succeed. It is very easy to get overwhelmed when we talk about transformation. And when we're overwhelmed, we get discouraged, we procrastinate, we avoid, and we give up. And so I want to see you succeed. So this is a little master tip right now, is that even though you want to change all aspects of your life, focus on one so we can succeed. Okay. So what is self-sabotage? Well, self-sabotage is any area of your life that you have contributed, that you are contributing to the failure or lack of success with. I want you to hear that again. So the self-sabotage is any aspect of your life that you are contributing to the failure or lack of success. Now, here's the tricky part. For many of us, that's hard to recognize the self part. How am I participating in this aspect? A lot of times we get stuck in the blame. We get distracted by the blame, that it's our spouse's fault, that it's our parents' fault, that it's society's fault, it's my boss's fault. I don't have a choice. I'm obligated. When we get trapped in those kind of mindsets, well, guess what? That's not self-sabotage. That would be considered just sabotage in general. And yes, there are outside components that will contribute to the failure or lack of success that you're experiencing. But that's not self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is your role in the failure. Now, I would encourage all of you to really pause and think about this for a minute, because even if someone else is maliciously or intently trying to sabotage your success, I guarantee you still are participating in that to some degree. Now, that degree could be 1%, it could be 5%, it could be 15%. But at the end of the day, that percentage that you participated is still contributing and is what needs to be investigated and transformed. Are you with me on this? This is some true mindful stuff, right? When we talk about becoming emotionally intelligent, it requires us to always take a hard look in the mirror at your role in how things are turning out. And it, again, doesn't matter if you're 90% or 1% at fault. We have to examine, how did I participate in this? So I want you to think of it like this. I want you to look at your life and say, okay, what area or what am I not satisfied with? What am I complaining the most about? What is causing me the most pain? So once you've determined that, let's say it's your finances. Maybe you are just constantly finding you don't have enough money. Or maybe it's with your diet and nutrition, where you find yourself losing the weight only to gain it all back again. Or that you start going to the gym and then just never go to the gym again. Or maybe you are finding this with your spirituality, right? That you meditate for a solid week and then you never touch it again. Right? There's so many ways that we could be sabotaging. But once we find out the area, now we want to look at our role in it. How did I contribute or participate to this? Okay. This is where we can begin to get off the hamster wheel. All right. Because self-sabotage doesn't just show up once in our life. It's going to show up repeatedly in our life. And this is where we want to get off of the crazy train of repeating the same types of relationships, finding ourselves in the same types of experiences, or finding ourselves in the same type of pain over and over again. Because if you think about even just nutrition, diet nutrition, we feel really good when we succeed on that 90-day challenge and we've lost all that weight and we're so proud of ourselves. And then 90 days later, all of a sudden we're right back where we started. Now, how do you feel? You probably feel discouraged. You feel worthless. And it's not just about the situation. It becomes an attack on your identity. And we start to take it personal. We feel worthless. We feel not enough. We feel like a failure. We feel embarrassed. And once we get to that state of mind, that's where depression, that's where, true procrastination, that's where avoidance, and that's really where that cycle can kick into overdrive, right? Because then we can go into despair or regret. And then what will happen is something will simmer, right, in that pain for long periods of time. We'll be miserable for long periods of time until we hit what we call our threshold. Now, once we hit that threshold, right, that is where, boom, we hit the wall of, I can't take this anymore. I'm over it, and I'm going to do something about it. Right? Am I right? So that's where transformation comes back in. That's where we join a new 90-day program and we lose all this weight and everybody's proud of us and we feel so good and we feel like $1,000 and we go buy new clothes. And 90 days after that, what do we do again? We gain it all back. Are you seeing the cycle? Are you seeing the cycle? Now, this shows up in finances. This is going to show up in your work ethic. Like if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to just be gung-ho. You're making tons of money. You're calling all these clients and all of a sudden, boom, you're broke. And then you go back to making all these calls and making all these clients and doing all these things and you strategize and everything and boom, you're broke again. So my point is that no matter how you're self-sabotaging, we need to figure out, okay, what is the thing of self-sabotage? And then we're going to talk about how you are participating in that cycle. So make sure to write it down, know what you're going to work on as we continue to move forward. Okay? Okay, so what was self-sabotage. Now let's talk about why we self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is very personal because it involves the who, the self. So when I say it's personal, I'm going to share with you the 3 main reasons why you self-sabotage. But those are just 3 categories. And then how you fit into those categories is very unique to you. In fact, it's very personal to you. So we want to be able to dive into this and figure out, okay, why do you self-sabotage? Now we know where you self-sabotage. You wrote that down. Okay, I self-sabotage in my relationships, in my fitness, in my diet, in my whatever. But now let's dig into why. And it boils down to these 3 areas. So if you're going to take notes, this is where you might want to jot some things down. Number 1, conditioning. We'll self-sabotage because this is what we've been taught. It's conditioned belief systems, conditioned programs that we're operating on. Maybe that as a child, you were taught that it was selfish to take care of yourself. And so you grew up in believing that I have to take care of others if they need me, especially if they need me. And so we begin to put all of our energy and attention on pleasing others without ever pleasing ourselves. Well, that's a conditioned belief system based on an experience or memories that you have as a child. Well, other conditioned belief systems could be that if you experience any sexual trauma when you were younger, right, is that that because you were, fit or young and vibrant and beautiful, well, that could be the experience that has taught you that it's safer to keep weight on. It is safer for us to not be beautiful. And so we find ourselves doing things to sabotage our own inner beauty. So there's a lot of different things from our past experiences that are going to shape and mold why we self-sabotage in particular areas. One of the things that I discovered when I was doing my work was that in finances, I couldn't figure out, okay, when I first started, I lived below the poverty line. It was understandable of why I lived paycheck to paycheck. But then when I started making multiple 6-figure income and I was still living paycheck to paycheck, all of a sudden I had to pause and take a step back to recognize I'm self-sabotaging. This doesn't make any sense. It makes sense when I had a real lack of money. It makes no sense when I'm standing in abundance. So when I looked back to see, okay, what was what maybe is my condition program? Why am I self-sabotaging? I recognized that growing up, all I ever knew and was taught was how to budget and live paycheck to paycheck. The belief system that I had was that there was just enough. So I didn't know what to do with excess money. And so I would create all of these new experiences that would have to take these chunks of money so I wouldn't have excess money. So that was a really hard one to recognize, is that all I've been taught was how to do that. So now not only did I have to recognize that I have this conditioning, now I have to go learn how to do something differently. I had to go learn how to do something differently. And that really was a challenging process because I had to learn how to budget, and then I had to learn how to get comfortable with excess money. So conditioning is a big part. The next big component of why you self-sabotage actually boils down to an emotional state of being, which we're all familiar with, and it's the big F word, and it's fear, okay? Fear is one of the biggest undercurrents that is left unchallenged in your cycle of self-sabotage. We often allow fear to take the driver's seat in our wheel of life. As we are going down the freeway of life, we allow fear to drive and fear to dictate the outcomes, the results that we want. That fear is the motivator for why you play small, why we avoid, why we procrastinate, why we just fail to take action. We fear rejection. We fear abandonment. We fear abuse. We fear neglect. We fear loss. We feel failure. We feel being less than. We feel being unworthy. We feel being not loved. We feel looking stupid. There's so many reasons why we fear. You see how I'm saying that this is personal? This is very personal. Okay, this is a category, but it is very personal. What are you afraid of is going to happen if you succeed with this? What are you afraid is going to happen if you have a different result? Even if that result is success, because you can fear success as equal as you fear failure. There's so many people, so many of my students that I talk to that will say, well, I fear success because I don't know if I'm capable of handling it. I don't know if I'm smart enough to be able to handle it. If I succeed, all of a sudden now I'm responsible. It's easier to stick in failure. See that now that all is just the fear-driven action, fear-driven belief system. And it's going to keep us stuck in that cycle. When I was talking about, people who've experienced sexual trauma and struggle with weight, a lot of times it's that fear that if I lose that weight, if I become fit and thin, that now I'm susceptible to unwanted advancements. And that's a common one that I've heard and worked with people through. So you have to realize, what is your fear here? If I lose the weight, if I have excess money, okay? Because some people are afraid if I have excess money that my family's going to try to take it from me, right? Or people are going to try to use me or abuse me, or that I'm not going to be able to handle it and I'll fail miserably, or whatever it is. But fear is one of the biggest components to why we will stay trapped in this cycle of self-sabotage. The next one is familiarity. Okay? It's what you know and expect and assume. Now, we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the Facebook Live. We had somebody who was sharing that she finds herself in her relationships always waiting for the shoe to fall. Right? And so I said, okay, so how do we self-sabotage? Because we really want to understand not just the what, but how. How do you self-sabotage? How does it manifest? And for her, it was manifesting in a way where she wasn't being vulnerable. She wasn't trusting. She didn't have both feet in. She had one foot out the door to protect herself. So she was constantly in self-preservation. And so when we dug deeper into not just the how she's self-sabotaging, to the why she's self-sabotaging, she recognized, well, it's what I know. I'm expecting this to fail. I'm expecting this to fail. And so when we really looked at her past relationships, all of a sudden we realized to say, okay, wait a minute. You have over and over again had these failed relationships. And so now we're just bringing that energy into this new relationship. And so we're tarnishing what is shiny and new. Now, one of my rules in relationships that I had to adopt myself, and this is just kind of a side note, but one of the rules that I had to adopt is that under no circumstances will I choose to punish the new people in my life for what somebody else has done to me. I want you to hear that. That took a lot for me to come to, is that because I always wanted to protect myself. I always wanted to have my shield and my guard up. I refused to be vulnerable. I refused to trust because of all the pain that I've experienced. I had a tremendous amount of pain. And so I would take those shields, those guards, and that bitterness into every new relationship with the expectation that they're going to do it to me as well. Well, once you bring that expectation in, is that your brain will unconsciously look for validation to that truth. So your brain will unconsciously look for validation of that truth. And so what you'll find is that you will notice it to some degree, and thus your mind will say, yep, there it is. See, they're just like that. I knew it. And then we have our excuse to stay guarded. So again, that rule that I developed, and I said, okay, Bonnie, you know what? How do you want to move forward? How do you want to be treated? Would you want somebody to treat you with that level of contempt? And the answer is no. I would not. And so I had to make the decision to say, okay, this person who's coming into my life has a clean slate until otherwise proven. And so I refuse to punish new people who come into my life for the pains that other people have caused. So it's just a little food for thought. It's just kind of added on to what we were talking about with Anna yesterday, if you guys joined that Facebook Live. But it's an important skill to recognize that this is just what you know. When we talked about money, right? When I went from making multiple six figures a year and I'm still living to paycheck, it's because that's what I knew. I expected that I just had enough. I didn't feel comfortable. I was terrified of excess money. And so as a result, I would always have to find things to spend it on. I'd always have to find reasons to only have just enough. So familiarity is a big one, but it's also not as well talked about. People don't really recognize that. It's like, hey, is this just all you know? And if that's the truth, then this is the one we're going to need to get training around. Because we need to get training around from people who only know another way. Are you with me on this? We need to get training from people who only know another way. And this is where, if in finances, that we need to talk to financial advisors. We need to learn how to budget. We need to, take a financial prosperity program. When it comes to, food and nutrition, like we need to go get educated in understanding if you just grew up and all you knew was fast food, junk food. Right? We have to learn these new ways, learn these new understandings of how these foods affect our bodies. So familiarity is yours, then education is going to be your big component. Now fear is a little bit different, and same with conditioning. We're going to have to reprogram ourselves. Same with familiarity, but familiarity is a lot more education driven on the other side. Okay. So hopefully at this point in the video, and if you're watching the recording, here's a good point to pause if you need to. And we want to ask ourselves, okay, where do we self-sabotage? Okay, how does that manifest? How is that showing up in your life? Okay, so if you haven't wrote that down, where are you self-sabotaging? How does it manifest? And then how are you participating to that? Okay, and so your participation probably is going to fall into one of those three characters. The more detailed understanding of your role, the easier it is to transform. Be careful of vague answers. All right? You want specific answers to how you participate. Not just kind of light and fluffy answers. We want specific understanding. So once we've gathered that intel, that's the pre-investigation work. That's the pre-investigation work. Once we've gathered that, now we can move into this section, which is how do we end this cycle? So again, if you're watching the recording, here's the space where you might need to pause and reflect on those areas so we can then move into what do you need to do next? I want all of you who are watching this to have a plan. I don't want you to just listen. I want you to have a plan. Every one of you, including myself, including all the experts, will self-sabotage in some degree in their life. And so all of us have work to do around this. And so I encourage you, no matter where you're at, to focus on one area and to ask yourself those three questions. Okay, with that being said, now let's move into the how do we end this? Because that's really what we want to, that's what everybody wants to do. But the problem in this personal development field is everybody is so quick to go to the solutions without doing the work to deep dive into the deep understanding of what's causing that symptom. The cycle itself is the symptom. It's the result, but it's not the cause. And if it was just getting another plan, like another diet plan or another budget plan, then, and like that's all it took, then you would have already had success. But you see, that's just an outward solution for an outward problem. We need to focus on the inward. What within you is contributing to this? What thoughts, what feelings, what beliefs do you have that are contributing to this cycle? If we can gather that information, that's what's going to allow us the freedom to be able to transform. I shouldn't say all, the majority of your outward issues are an inward job, okay? The majority of your outward issues are an inward job, and we need to discover what that is. So how do we end it? Well, let me first start with my disclaimer. The truth is, it's not easy. If it was easy, right, then I would just give you a sugar-coated pill and say, there you go, woo, magic, go ahead and you're done, right? And I'd be a billionaire if I'd be able to package it, bottle it, brew it, and put it in a little bottle for you. But the truth is, it's not easy. Because it's not even just because breaking a habit, right? Because a habit is just repeated action. Well, where's that repeated action coming from? Well, it's coming from the inside world. It's coming from our thoughts, our feelings, and our belief systems. So the feelings of fear or inadequacy, the beliefs that I'm not capable, that I can't do it, that I'm not smart enough. So it's always coming from the inside world. And so we have to do a lot of work to not only recognize what is our role here, but then to begin to transform it one step at a time. So it's not easy, but it's totally worth it, okay? So I wanted to make sure to put that in there. It's not easy, but it's totally worth it because you're worth it. Your joy, your happiness, your success is worth the investment that you need to make into understanding your cycle. This is where we can have freedom. And I ask yourself to pause and reflect here. How would how would your life be different? How would your life be different if you weren't so guarded or defensive? How would your life be different if you weren't so reactive? If we were emotionally in control? How would your life be different if we could put this weight struggle or this finance struggle or these relationship struggles behind us? How would your life be different if we could truly step into the vision and version of yourself that you know in your heart of hearts is possible? I truly want you to pause and reflect on that for a moment because that's a powerful question. How would your life be different? Because this is where we can get the inspiration and the motivation to go through the difficult process of change. But if we don't have that vision, if we don't know what's in it for me, what's in it for me? What is my outcome? What do I receive? What am I going to get for doing all of this work and energy and effort and the struggle that it's going to take to transform? If you don't know that vision, then it's going to be easy to get lost in the weeds. It's going to get easy to get discouraged. It's going to get easy to find yourself just distracted, right? We need to have this better understanding of why you're doing this. And the big reason is because we only change for two reasons. We change for two reasons. We hurt enough where we have to. So these are the students that come to me and they're just over it. I'm done. I'm done with this crap. I'm done struggling. I'm done with this, right? They've hit the low of the low of the low of whatever they're dealing with and they just had enough. And that breaking point is the motivator because they hit their threshold, like we talked about earlier, the threshold. And they're willing and able to do whatever it takes. But getting to that place sucks, doesn't it? Like it's painful. It's icky. It's like, ugh, I don't want to go here anymore. I don't want to have to go to this extreme to change. Well, that's where the other side of it is where you learn enough where you want to change. So those are the two reasons. You hurt enough or you learn enough. And I'm encouraging you to learn enough about yourself, about this process that you want to change. And that truly is going to feed and fuel your success. Okay, so the first step is what we have to do, and I've been like drilling this in your minds for a while, is that we need to get to the root. We need to get to the root of the issue. We need to understand, how are you participating? What conditioning, memories, okay, that support this lack of self-worth, this lack of self-confidence, this cycle? What fear, okay, what are you most afraid of happening? We need to get to the root of that stuff. We need to understand, where are my thoughts? Where are my feelings? What is it that I believe? What is it that I perceive? What do I assume, right? When we think about the familiarity, why is this pain so comfortable? We absolutely need to get to the root of these understandings to know, what is your story? Why does this keep happening to you? And how are you participating in it? We want to get out of the victim story that it's happening to you, and we want to get into seeing, okay, what can I do to transform this through me? It's not happening to you per se, but we're contributing. We're either attracting these same types of people, these same types of circumstances over and over and over again for a reason. Maybe we feel we deserve it. We need to be punished. Okay, we feel that, and we need to be punished because we suck as a mom or as a dad or as a kid, or we were told over and over again that we suck as a person. And so we feel that this is how we are just kind of punishing ourselves. So whatever it is, you need to get to the root of it. We need to understand the why that is personal to you. And the tricky part with this is it's unique to each person. As I mentioned before, right, this is not going to be a cookie cutter answer. I can't just say, you know what your problem is, it's blank. Now, I probably could if you and I sat and we did some coaching together. You bet your butt I can help you come to the why and understanding your role. But for the most part, this is a real deep self-reflection. This is a hard look in the mirror and getting out of that, well, they did it or they are doing this. I mean, yes, acknowledge all of that. Write that down. Okay, all of the blame, all of the excuses, all of the outward reasons, write it down. Get it out of your head and off of your heart. Because they're a jerk, they don't care, they're narcissistic, they're whatever, get it out. And once we get all of that written out, now we want to turn the tides and say, okay, now how am I contributing to this? And that is a much harder question to answer, especially if there's other players in the game. It's a much harder question to answer. And the deeper you dive in this, and the more that you start to understand you, the easier it is to be able to answer. But without getting to the root, the other two that I'm going to share with you right now are not going to, you're not going to be able to go there. So the root is the first part. Once we've determined the root, now we can release. You guys, this is my 3-step empower formula. And if you haven't heard me talk about this before, this is the big core of our proprietary information. This is how we help people be able to transform. And we do these 3 categories. Now they're much more in depth, but this is the process to really even build more self-confidence, to enhance your emotional intelligence, to learning how to establish boundaries, to end bad habits, right? All of these things, to ending procrastination, how to become more motivated. These are really the 3 processes, the 3 steps that we kind of take you through to help you recognize as we get to the root of your problem. We need to figure out how you're participating in whatever it is that you're missing. And then we need to release. This is where we're going to be releasing the story and the trapped emotion. We all are master storytellers. You are a master storyteller. In fact, you've gotten so good at telling the story of your life. If that story is disempowering you, if that story victimizes you, if that story is keeping you trapped in a certain perception or persona or identity, then you have to go back to the root and understand why you're telling the story in this way. Because if you're the author, you're the one that gets to decide how the story is told, the direction and feel and energy that this story will have, and the result that the story will take you through. But if you're not understanding your motivators or the purpose behind the story of why you complain about these things the way that you do, why you feel sorry for yourself the way that you do, the why you blame the way that you do, if you don't understand the reasons of why you are saying these things or feeling these things, and then we're not going to be able to release them. You just will automatically continue to go back and tell that story that way. But you see, a lot of times we tell stories in a way to feel connected, as a way of feeling validated or righteous or right, as a way to connect or to have people feel sorry for us, to get attention, to feel loved or supported. Now, it could be a very dysfunctional way of how we do it, but that could be the reasons of why you do this. It's how you protect yourself. I used to be the master of victimization, you guys. And based on my story and based on all the things that I experienced, it was understandable of why I was a victimized person. Well, I was a victim to a lot of dysfunction. I was a child victim to dysfunction and pain and abuse. But when that became part of my identity, and that became how I connected to people. And so when someone would say, are you still close with your family? That would be my opportunity to share this tragedy and then you to feel sorry for me. So then that way in my mind, and it wasn't even conscious, you guys, this was not malicious or conscious, but it was a way of how I self-preservation, that if you felt sorry for me, you would become my hero. You would protect me. You would become my rescuer in some way. And so unconsciously, I would tell these stories in ways that would disempower me so you would feel empowered to want to protect and guard and defend me. Does that make sense? Now, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't even conscious of it. It wasn't until I started getting to the root of understanding why I was doing this and why that I felt so victimized and why, I felt this way about myself that I started to recognize, whoa, I am telling the story in a way that is being transmitted and received in a way that's going to continue to disempower me. Well, I had to release that. I had to release that altogether because, again, I'm the master author. And then I had to release all the resentment, all the bitterness, all the reasons that I was choosing to hold on to these trapped emotions. I had to learn to forgive. I had to learn to release all of the pain and the shame and the regret and the disappointment. And all of that has to be released in order for us to get to the next step, which is to be resolved. So we have to get to the root, and then we have to release the stories and the emotions, the belief systems, the perspectives, the assumptions that we have, so we can get to resolve. And resolve is where we are consciously choosing. This is where you consciously choose the outcome. This is where we're consciously choosing, who are you? This is where we consciously choose how you want your life to be and how you want to interact with others and how you want them to interact with you. The resolve is where we become absolute in our new way of thinking, where there's no more fear, there's no more doubt, there's no more question about whether or not you're worthy, whether or not you're capable, whether or not that you're good enough, that you know that you are. Now, do you see how these 3 steps, in the simplicity of me explaining them, are vastly complex, right? Is that they are going to take a lot, each step is going to take a lot of deep reflection. And then this last one is, who do you want to be, right? If we want to become resolved, well, this is why I said pause and reflect on how your life is going to be different. Because if we can't vision where you want to go, then we're just going to be meandering in the ocean, and then we're going to go adrift. We're going to go adrift because we don't have a destination. 99.9% of ships that are operating in the sea reach their destination because they know their destination before they start. 99.9% of ships who set course in the sea reach their destination because they know where they're going. They know where they want to go. So they have their destination set. Well, to get resolved, we need to set that destination. We need to just really ask, who do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? How do you want to respond? How do you want your relationships to look like and feel like and be like? How do you want to feel when you leave a conversation? How do you want to feel about food? Do you want to stress about it? Do you want to feel guilty when you go to a party and somebody has cake and you totally had a piece of it and then you're just, well, that's it, I suck for the rest of the week? No. I'm sure that that's not the destination you want to be at, but that's the destination you are at. So to get resolved, we need to consciously choose, where do you want to go? What do you want this to feel like? I want to be able to have freedom when it comes to food and diet and nutrition. I don't want to be a prisoner to my choices. I want to know that it's okay that I can have that cookie and it's not going to negatively affect me unless that cookie, I feel so much shame about it that it leads me to eat the entire box. Or it leads me to eat cookies for the rest of the week because I feel so bad about myself for having that one cookie. If that's the destination you're at, that's not probably the direction you want to go. So we need to consciously choose the new direction, the new destination. And that's what release means. Okay, so I have about 7 more minutes. And since we actually have a small group, I'm going to open it up for questions. Thank you, Paul. He says very wise. So I'm going to open this up for questions. Maybe that you know your cycle of self-sabotage, maybe that you're struggling in some way. I would love to see how I can support you through this process. So you're all muted right now, but if you have a question, please unmute yourself or comment. I mean, maybe there's just some aspect of this that is a real big takeaway for you today, and you just want to share. It's a small group, so no pressure, even though there's only 3 of you. Comments or questions? Like, what's your big takeaway? So Shirley, since I know you so well, I'm going to just call you out. Okay.
No.
What is your big nugget today? What was your big takeaway or your message that really kind of resonated for you?
I think just going back in my history, I'm looking at where the root of my lack of self-confidence is, which is what brings in the fear and the procrastination big time.
Yes. Okay. So when you're digging into that, where I want you to focus is, it's what I call my BTFA process. Okay. So this is an acronym, BTFA, and it actually spells nothing, but the A is the action or the result. Okay. But for us to get to the underlying issues that we need to really recognize, okay, how do I feel? Right? So the feeling is where maybe the fear is, the insecurities are, right? But then we want to go back to the thought. Okay, that's the T. So we want to really see, okay, what am I thinking about that causes me to feel this way? And then we want to take it even a step further, and where it's the belief. What have I been taught? Okay, what do I remember? Like from my past, from my childhood, from experiences that I've had that has taught me to think this way in the first place. So follow that process, right? So the BTFA is kind of that process, right? So A is action, or it could be result, or it could be inaction if you're a procrastinator, okay? So that is the end result. And we really, when we're digging inwards, it's like, where are my feelings that contribute to this? Where are my thoughts that contribute to those feelings? And then what is it that I believe or perceive that is causing me to think that way in the first place? That framework is going to help you with that deep root diving. Okay, because that's going to help us kind of break it up into these different components to the head and the heart and our conditioning experiences. And when we talk about those three areas, right, the conditioned experiences are going to be under the belief. Familiarity could be under the belief as well, or the familiarity could be thought, right? So if we are so accustomed to thinking that I suck or I'm not enough or nobody cares about me, if we're so accustomed to that, we're not even going to be aware that those thoughts are even processing or passing through our psyche. They're going to happen fleeting thoughts, fleeting moments, right? You have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. So those thoughts could just be just in transition because they're so familiar, we're not even noticing them. But we want to start to raise our awareness to start to say, wait a minute, just because it's normal doesn't make it right. Just because it's normal doesn't make it right. I need to start to tune in to how often I think these crappy things about myself, because they're coming through the mind a lot. And that's what feeds this feelings of discouragement or sadness or depression, which then drives this procrastination and avoidance behavior. So we really want to deep dive into this understanding of what's under the surface here. And then we can go back to the belief, the old self, to really discover that. But I want you to get into the thought patterns and really recognizing, how this does. And one of the things I tell my students all the time is that you should get yourself a handy dandy little notebook. Okay. So a little notebook that you can carry around with you, or you could use your phone, because your phone nowadays has a note section, which is amazing. And you just start to track, like, where are my thoughts? Every time you find yourself avoiding, every time you find yourself procrastinating, every time you find yourself being discouraged or even feeling kind of down, that's a great opportunity to say, what have I been thinking about? What have I been thinking about? Where have my thoughts been lately? And then once we can determine the thoughts, now you can dive even back further and say, where do these thoughts even come from? Why do I believe this crap about myself? But this is where the work comes in, right? Without that data, if we're not gathering that data regularly, we're not going to understand what those thoughts are. We're not going to be in tune with them enough, and we're going to continue to be at the effect of whatever this process is that you're struggling with. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So that would be my assignment to you. Is you need to bust out a little handy dandy notebook or get your phone and use that as a tracker. And every time you're feeling discouraged or down, or every time you find yourself binge watching, if that's how you avoid, right? Binge watching something on TV, a cooking channel or something, right? That's where all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm in self-sabotage. Let's back this train up and see what's going on under the surface, or what's under the hood. Okay?
That's definitely going on.
Well, perfect. Use it as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity. Okay. So how I break that cycle is that if, you're used to just watching TV, it's a number, is that put on the radio. Okay. So put on some music that'll stimulate you. And then that way you'll have an easier time turning off the TV. But turning off the TV into nothingness, if you're so accustomed to the TV being the number, is going to draw up way too many emotions, and it's just not going to work.
Anxiety, yeah.
Yeah. So we want to turn on music, and music that really, it could be soothing music or it could be inspiring music, right? So sometimes I'll turn on music that really just gets my butt moving. I'll be honest, right? Like I just like shaking my booty while I'm getting ready. Like that's like how I'm getting energized. But then there's some days where I just want to be contemplative. I think that's how you say that word, right? Is where I want to be reflective. And as a result, then I'll put on something that's a little bit more soothing. And then that kind of sets the tone of where I'm going to go from there. So it's what we call the step down, right? So if you are a soda drinker, for example, if you drink a lot of soda and all of a sudden you decide, I don't want to drink soda anymore, it's going to be very difficult to transition from soda to water. So my husband actually shared this with me, is that how he was able to kind of break that sugar addiction is he went from soda to Gatorade, and then Gatorade to what's called G2, which is like their lower sugar flavored, to flavored water to water. And now he's just a water drinker, right? But we often think that, I just need to stop this thing, without really recognizing that we need to wean our way off of this thing. Does that make sense? Cool. Cool. All right. So I'm going to switch over real quick. Karen, any questions from you, or are you at a place that you can't talk today? I'm not sure if she can hear me. Okay. Well, either way, thank you guys so much for joining me. If you're watching this replay, thank you so much for watching this replay. We're here to serve you every step of the way. And until next time, I wish you guys all the best. Mwah! Happy Thursday, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.